we've all been in a discussion hurtling off the track and into the canyon far, far below. Chances are you've been in this type of discussion as a student and as a teacher, and it's no fun in either scenario. So, how do we prevent it? And what do we do if it's already happening and we can see the glaze washing over our students' eyes? In today's episode, the fifth in our discussion series, we're diving into how to deal with discussions that just aren't working. Because even if you prepare in all the ways, those days do happen, and it doesn't have to mean that all is lost. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more. More creativity, more engagement, more joy. And no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. Okay, so before we get into all the different strategies you can use if your discussion is starting to go off the rails, I want to talk about a way to prevent that from happening. And it's something we've already talked about in this series, but really, discussion warm-ups are the easiest way to make sure that discussions don't fall apart. So I feel like we have to talk about it really quickly. Students are going to struggle a lot less to speak about topics they've already warmed up on, and you will feel a lot less pressure to need to rescue them, to need to intervene in any way. So if you can possibly take a few minutes at the start of a discussion to do a small group chat, some kind of writing activity, a search through the text for some kind of specific type of quotation, a related media clip with a conversation, anything to help students begin to think about the topics they'll be discussing, it will really help with the sort of flow, the fluidity, the comfort level during the discussion. And the more you feel like your students are going to struggle during discussion, the more specific and extensive you can make your warm-up. So you know they've given tons of thought to the exact questions that are likely to come up in your discussion. Kind of paired with that, we're going to be talking about all these different ways that you can help if discussion isn't going well. But there's a difference between helping with kind of these types of scaffolds that I'm going to talk about and helping by going into rescue mode. And that is something you really want to avoid. If you go into rescue mode when your students are struggling in discussion and you sort of jump in and you say all the things you were hoping they would say, and it just sort of turns into a friendly lecture, and you take all of the responsibility away from them and you just kind of take over, they are going to expect that. They are going to be reliant on you to do that. And so the next day when discussion gets quiet, everyone's just sort of going to look over at you like, okay, we're ready for you to tell us what we're supposed to know about this chapter, or we're ready for you to make the connection to current events or whatever it is. And so, that's really what we're trying to avoid, even though you could probably give a lovely lecture on the reading and you could probably make lots of brilliant connections. If you're really in this process of helping students learn to help themselves in discussion, we don't want that. So these interventions that we're now going to talk about are sort of instead. There are ways that you can build a rescue mission into a discussion without taking over, while still keeping all of the responsibility for the content on the student's shoulders. And I really think that that's where you want it. So let's get into it now. So the very first one is super simple. I have found myself doing this in many different class discussions where maybe I thought that the conversation was really going to flow and I didn't do a ton of warm up and I didn't worry about it that much. And then the discussion just kind of died. And what I would do is just a quick pause, turn, and talk. And so it's almost like a 2-minute jump out of discussion and then we're going to jump back in. I would just say, hey guys, let's all just pause for a second. Jacob just asked such an interesting question. Just pause, think about Jacob's question, and turn to the person next to you and talk about Jacob's question. Jot down a couple notes. When we come back into our discussion, we are going to start with this question, and I want to hear from a lot of you on sort of what you think about it. And then 5 minutes later, after they've had a chance to think and talk and write, restart the discussion and see if it doesn't flow a lot more easily now that they've had some time to think and discuss with a partner. For some kids who just need more time, like this will be such a helpful scaffold for them. And for everyone, a chance to sort of go back, look at the text, gather their thoughts. Like that's only going to lead into better energy in the next part of the discussion. Similarly, for variety, you can try a pause and write. Okay, so if you feel like you just really want everybody to go deep and you don't want anybody to be relying on their partner, take a second after an interesting question and invite everybody to pause and write. Or maybe it's a question that hasn't come up that you wanted to have come up, and you say, like, oh, Sylvia's question that we just discussed made me think of this other question in the back of my mind. Let's pause. Let's take a couple minutes. I want everybody to just write down their response to this question and go ahead and find one quotation that relates to your response that you could bring up in this next part of the discussion. Boom, go. Maybe you want to put a timer up on your smartboard for 3 minutes or whatever, so that students just take a little bit of time to reflect before you move back into class conversation. Okay, another thing you can do when a discussion is really going off the rails, especially if you feel like students are just really having a hard time staying focused and they're going off the rails with their connections. Like I've been in some hilarious freshman classes where 1 second we're talking about the Odyssey and the next second we're talking about Emily's sister's brother's cousin's favorite movie. And I'm like, wait, what just happened? And everyone is laughing. And it's like, okay, we need to get back to our focus. If you get into this kind of experience where you're just kind of trying to pull everybody back, a silent discussion can be really helpful. And you don't have to have set up a silent discussion from the start. You can just sort of flip the button and go into silent mode. It can be in the middle of a discussion that's happening that's just not working out. And you can say, you know what, like, let's just pause here and everybody take out your notebook and write a question based on the conversation that we've been having. Something that you wish had come up or something that you'd like to dig deeper into that has come up, and just put that question across the top of your notes and then have them pass to the left and say, like, respond to your question that's now in front of you. And 1 minute later, have them pass again, pass again, pass again. And you can just finish the whole discussion this way if necessary. Or after a few minutes and a little bit of silent discussion, you feel like students are ready, then you can bring them back to a discussion out loud. Okay, this next one isn't exactly a scaffold. It's more like just a little funny strategy to pull out every once in a long while with the class. If you feel like you've had some awkward silences and you want to show them that you're not afraid of those awkward silences and you want to encourage them to just like jump back in and deal with it, consider having cricket noises queued up on your phone or on your computer. Now, this is going to sound so silly, but you can find a sound clip for anything. And you know that sort of old joke that like you say something and all you hear back is crickets? I think this is just such a funny way to show students you're not freaked out by the awkward silence. Things are totally quiet for a minute after somebody's question, and you play that little cricket sound effect. Everybody's going to laugh, and you can just give them a little pep talk with reminders about what they can do when there's an awkward silence if you feel like they need that. Okay, another thing that I've had some success with that I think can be really fun is to help students break out of the ruts they're in with discussion roll cards. Now, this you have to have prepped a little bit in advance. So this is a scaffold that you could put into place like the day after an awkward discussion or a poor discussion so that you don't have another one and you kind of shake things up. So what I did with my roll cards is I tried to put on different types of roles that I wished students would explore a little more fully. Like if I felt like we weren't making enough connections to the real world, I might have a discussion role that was like, try to seek out connections to daily life or to pop culture. Or if I felt like we could be connecting more to their history class, I might have a role that was like make connections to history class. You can be as specific as you want, or you can be more vague. You can have a role that's like try to draw out other students, ask interesting follow-up questions, or a role that's like try to help people who are interrupting, quiet down diplomatically. You can decide what you think is needed, but the fun thing about discussion roll cards is that I always make it a big secret. I put them on paper and then I like to tape them under students' chairs, but you could also just pass them out secretly. Tell them not to tell anybody their role, and then have the discussion you would normally have, but asking people to follow their card, to follow their role. And I think what you'll find is that students feel a little freer to do what the role says, because somehow it sort of unlocks the chance to be different, almost like you're an actor on a stage, right? It's not you making all these connections to the 21st century. It's like the role. You have to do that because it's your role that day. Or it's not you trying to be a leader in discussion. Your card says you're the leader. So you're really trying to be responsible that day because you got the leader card. And that can just kind of help students explore different possibilities, and it also helps them see each other in different ways. And so I think it's really helpful to do this every once in a long while, or specifically to kind of target problems that you're having, and then let students reflect afterwards. How did you behave differently in this discussion? What did you learn by behaving differently that you might want to apply forward? What did you learn by seeing other people behave differently that made you realize that maybe our discussions could change in such and such a way if everybody sort of took the lessons of this day and moved them on to the next discussion. Okay, next idea, create a challenge around a pain point that you're having. This, again, is something you can take from a discussion going off the rails and take it forward. So let's say, for example, everyone just keeps asking these super surface questions what happened? I didn't really get what happened after the character fought with their dad. Can somebody explain that? And then somebody explains that in 5 seconds. And then somebody's like, what is the point of this symbol? And somebody answers that in 5 seconds. And all the questions are just really surface. And you want students to learn how to go deeper. Maybe you create a little challenge within the discussion or for the next discussion where you say, one thing I really want us to be working on is going deeper with our questions. We're asking questions that really stay on the surface. You give some examples of surface questions. You give some examples of deeper questions. Maybe you ask students for some examples of both. And then you say, in the next discussion, if I hear 10 questions that go deeper than the surface, I'm going to bring everybody donuts the next day. Or I am going to give a get out of homework free card to the student who asks the most questions that go beyond the surface, or whatever. Just a little challenge and a little reward. And it just allows you to draw attention to the thing that's a problem in a positive way. Instead of railing against the problem, you're providing a little fun challenge for how they might overcome the problem and get a fun prize. Yay. That prize can be so small, right? It can be I'm going to bring in a little pack of Smarties for everyone. And as soon as you guys complete this challenge, you'll get the Smarties. And if we don't do it next time, we'll try another challenge for the next time, and you can still have a chance to win the Smarties. Or maybe the prize is we'll take the last 2 minutes of class to watch the world's funniest cat video. It doesn't have to be something that you have to buy. I'm sure you can think of something that would just be pleasant for your students that they would look forward to and want to win. Okay, similarly, if you have a problem with some area of discussion, so this is similar to the challenge, but if you don't want to frame it as a challenge, another thing you can do is just hit pause on the discussion, step outside it for a second, and brainstorm with your students around the problem area. So let's say, for example, they're just really struggling to come up with the types of things to say in discussion. Everyone is kind of explaining the plot, exploring the meaning of the plot, exploring the themes of the plot, but they're not having a chance to really connect the work to life, to their own life, to their family background, to their experiences of the American dream, or to their understandings from history class, or to the things that are happening in the news. They're not going out from the book to make wider meaning in their life based on literature, and you want them to. Maybe this is a place where you hit pause and you sort of say, Okay, I have this giant paper up. We're going to make a list here of the types of connections we could make between literature and the world, our lives, everything. How could you make connections, guys, from this book to the life that we're leading? And then brainstorm with them and put up a big, colorful chart on the wall. Connections to life, connections to class, connections to politics, connections to Twitter, connections to whatever, right? The things that are interesting to them. And then in the discussion, when you unpause and you continue, they now have this list in front of them of ideas, of ways that they could go deeper, and you can continue to kind of coach them and reward those moments where they make the connections and say like, "Oh man," at the end, 3 or 4 people made connections to their lives, or 2 people made connections to history class. That was so cool, or whatever. Okay, the last thing I want to touch on is the fact that discussions don't always have to be one certain length. I think this is an easy trap to fall into, feeling like a discussion has to be a half an hour or a discussion has to be the whole period. And I like to think about this kind of in the same way that I would think about choice reading. Discussion is something where students can really build up their muscles. And so if you're exploring discussion and really trying to push your students to be more student-led at first, consider not starting out with a 30-minute discussion. Try having an 8-minute discussion and really coach them that this is going to be, you want it to be a strong discussion. You're going to try to really let them own it and put up a timer, a countdown timer on your board and say 8 minutes. Can we do it for 8 minutes and let them go? And then maybe a couple days later, your discussion is 10 minutes, and the next week it's 10 minutes again, and then it's 15 minutes. But you don't have to go right in with 30 minutes. And I think limiting your length can help you find more success sooner and help students kind of slowly strengthen that ability to make discussion successful, to make connections, to ask deeper questions, to explore text carefully, to like actively listen to each other, to make transitions between topics, all the things that you want them to work on. Okay, my friend, so the next time you're in a discussion that's not going well, remember you've got options. You don't have to stay in a train sliding off the rails. And if you find yourself thinking that grading your discussions might help if that wasn't so complicated, then you've guessed the topic of the next and final episode in our discussion series, coming your way on Thursday, all about how to provide accountability in discussion. Thanks so much for joining me today for our 5th in our series of 6 episodes on discussion. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.